Hi, welcome to the Gemara on the bottom of Chad Amud Bet. We're starting from the last Mishnah on Chad Amud Bet, and your only question on this section is going to be to make, it's really two questions, to summarize the Mishnah and to make a structure chart of the Gemara. We'll start with the Mishnah. Matnitin, ein bin svarim utfilin mezuzot, ela shehasfarim nichtavin bechol lashon, utfilin mezuzot einan nichtavot ela ashurit. That's the first sentence of the Mishnah. So we're familiar with the structure by now. Ein bin, there's no difference between books, meaning Sifrei Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, and tefillin and mezuzot, except that Svarim have to be written, Svarim can be written in any language, and tefillin and mezuzot may not be written except in Ashurit, which is Hebrew, and that refers to Hebrew, the language, and also the writing of Hebrew that we're used to, the script that we're used to. Rashbag Omer, Af b'sfarim lo hitiru shichtavu ela yavanit. Rashbag has a different opinion. Rashbag says that even when it comes to books, they didn't allow them to be written except for in Greek, meaning he disagrees with the fact that you can write Sfarim in any language and says, no, the only other language you can write them in, presumably besides Hebrew, is Greek. So again, your first question is just to summarize the Mishnah. You can either write a summary in your own words, or you can create sort of like a structure chart from the Mishnah that expresses for you what's the same and what's different about these cases and incorporates Rashbag's opinion. Here's the Gemara. Halatofran begidin u'tameat hayadayim ze v'ze shavin. That's the first line of the Gemara. We're familiar with the structure by now as well. This means, meaning the Mishnah implies that for sewing them with sinews and for having them make hands impure, this and this are the same. Meaning both Sfarim, both Sifrei Tanakh and tefillin and mezuzot, when you sew the pieces of parchment together, have to be sewn with sinews, not with any other kind of thread. And both make your hands impure. Both have that status that we've discussed previously of imparting impurity to your hands. That's a sign that they are in fact holy. Now the Gemara moves on to the next part of the Mishnah. Usfarim nichsavin b'chol lashon v'chulei. And books may be written in any language. Sfarim, Sifrei Kodesh, can be written in any language. Or minhu, we have a contradiction from a Braita. Mikra shekatvo targum, v'targum shekatvo mikra, uktav ivri, eino metamet hayadayim ad shichtavenu b'chtav ashurit al hasefer uvidyo. If you have mikra, something, Torah, that is written in Aramaic, or a piece of the Torah that is normally written in Aramaic, but which now is written in Hebrew. So in either case, you flip the languages, and the Gemara will give examples of those later on. But if you flip the language from Hebrew to Aramaic, or from Aramaic to Hebrew, or if you wrote something in Ketav Ivri, which is an older form of Hebrew writing, not the one we use now, in all of these cases, it's not mitameat hayadayim. These things will not make your hands ritually impure, meaning they don't actually count as Sifrei Kodesh, until you actually write it in Ketav Ashurit, in this more updated form of Hebrew, on cloth, on a scroll, and with ink. Amar Rava. Rava says, lo kasha, meaning we don't have a real contradiction between the Mishnah and the Braita. Kan begufan shalanu, kan begufan shalahen. Here it's talking about our letter form, and there it's talking about their letter form. Meaning, the Mishnah is talking about a case where you use our letters, and the Braita is talking about a case where you use other letters. Meaning, the Braita is really focused on the form of the letters as opposed to language, so they're sort of talking about two different things, and so our Mishnah and the Braita are not a contradiction. Again, our Mishnah is concerned about language, and the Braita is talking about using a different form of the letters, right? The form of the letters that comes from the other language. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says to Rava, B'mayu kimta lahahi begufan shalahen. How did you, literally, what did you uphold it, or what did you interpret it as, for that one to say that it's talking about their letters? In other words, how do you see in the Braita that it's talking about only the letter form? My area mikra shekatvo targum v'targum shekatvo mikra. Because if you were right, basically, if you were right that it was only talking about the form of the letters, my area, why would it be talking about, for what reason would it be talking about Mikra that was written in Aramaic and Aramaic that was written in Hebrew, right? If it doesn't care, if it only cares about form of letters, then why would the Breita be talking about languages? I feel Mikra shekatvo Mikra, v'targum shekatvo targum nami, right? Even writing Hebrew in Hebrew and Aramaic should also be a problem if you change the form of the letters. So what makes you think that the Breita is talking about form of the letters? Tahakatani, this is just the finishing up the question, because it taught ad shichtavenu ashurit al hasefer uvidyo, until you write it in ashurit, in that language, and on a scroll and in ink. So in other words, Abaye is basically saying it doesn't make sense. Your distinction, Rav, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like the Breita is only talking about the form of the letters, whereas the Mishnah is focused on language. The Breita seems to also care about language. Oops. Ella lo kasha. Rather, it's not a problem. Here's a new solution to the contradiction between the Mishnah and the Breita. Harabanan, Harabi Shimon ben Gamliel. One is talking about, one is the opinion of the rabbis, meaning our Mishnah is the opinion of the rabbis, and the other is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, meaning the Breita is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Irashbag, if it's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, ha'ika yavanit. But there is Greek. In other words, Rashbag doesn't really fit with our Breita because if our Breita is talking about not switching and not switching languages, and Rashbag said you can switch to Greek. So that solution doesn't work either. We reject that solution. Ella lo kasha. Rather, it's not a contradiction. Here's a new attempt to solve the problem. Kan bisfarim, kan bisfilinu mezuzot. Here, this, meaning our Mishnah, is talking about Sfarim, books, and the Breita is talking about tefillin and mezuzot, about writing tefillin and mezuzot. And that, in fact, does solve the contradiction. We just say that the Mishnah and the Breita are talking about different cases, right? Our Mishnah, when it said you could write it in every language, that was talking, we know that was talking specifically about books. And the Mishnah doesn't specify, right? The Breita doesn't specify. It just says Mikra shekatvo targum. Doesn't specify that it's talking about books. So we can interpret it as talking about tefillin and mezuzot. And again, your question about this section is just to create a structure chart for the Gemara on this section. We'll stop here.